Welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Bahamundi, and I'll be joined by Evan Birch. Enduring Minds is where we explore the intersection of mental health and endurance sports while breaking the silence and stigma surrounding men's mental health. We're here to have real, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, sharing the struggles, victories, and everything in between that shapes who we are. So leave the shame, guilt, and fear at the door and join us for another episode of Enduring Minds. If you're new here, we kicked off the first 3 episodes by introducing the 3 of us as hosts. You can find those episodes on the Run Try Bike YouTube channel and on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts, along with 8 other incredible shows. So do me a favor. Please subscribe, rate, and review, as that helps us grow the podcast and be able to tell more incredible stories. So without further ado, let's chat with Evan a little bit before we bring in our special guest. Evan, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm good. A little bit tired after my adventure with my dog on the weekend at Orcas Island 100. So we're back home resting. We're both recovering like champions, and yeah, we're feeling good.
Which one of you two is eating more food these days, or today, I guess,
It's
really?
definitely me, only because she can't access it herself. That's the only reason why. Yeah,
Don't forget, recovery is an important part of this whole process. So make sure that Nova's getting enough kibble too.
exactly.
Well, hey, we've got a really special show today. I'm excited because we're going to be joined by Toby Oehler. Toby shared his story on our website in November of 2024, and it was impactful. My conversation with him was emotional and it was uplifting, much like I expect this conversation to be. Toby is a first responder, much like you, who found cycling, but it was not just a help for his mental health. It was also a menace for him, which I found super interesting because we always put these sports in positive lights and very look at the dark side of them. He's faced many health challenges. At one point, he weighed 330 pounds, which led him to seek help. And as of November of last year, he had lost 97 pounds thanks to cycling, but has done much more for him than that. So without giving away the entire story, let's bring Toby onto the show and have a conversation. Hey, Toby, welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast. How are you?
Hey, Jason, I'm good. Hi, Evan.
Hey, Toby.
So I kind of gave a little bit of the background of your story, which we shared in November of 2024 on runtrymag.com. And just a little bit more background. Toby and I got introduced to each other through Dr. Aaron Ayala of Scatty Sports Psychology. And I couldn't be happier for that connection because Toby has been a tremendous support for Run Try Bike, but I've also learned a lot from him. And one of the things I want to kickstart this conversation with, Toby, is I want to give the audience a full understanding of the trauma that you dealt with as a first responder, because I don't think people fully understand what people in your profession go through. Listening to Evan in multiple conversations and then talking to you, I catch myself getting emotional about it. Can you give us an idea of how being a first responder impacted you and your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in public safety for 25 years now, firefighter, EMT, paramedic. And I think the biggest thing that people don't quite understand about what we do is we show up on someone's worst day and we have to be on our best. We can't show up anything less than our best. And we may have just had the worst call of our lives and we're expected to show up and just put on a smile and do it again for the next patient. And I think for me, that was kind of the biggest thing is carrying that, like always having to be switched on and never getting time to actually process what we have just seen or what we have just done.
And I want to turn this over to Evan here in a moment because there's going to obviously be questions that he would be able to ask better than I can and have more insight. But one of the things that we were talking about in the green room was, for me, I grew up in New York. I was around for 9/11, and we applauded the first responders that were there. During COVID, people were clapping for first responders, but once the moment passes, we move on in life. Is that something that also has an impact on you, in that the clapping and the enjoyment and thankfulness of the work sort of ceases to end, and is that something that has an impact as well?
Yeah, I think it does. I don't believe any of us that are truly in this profession to help people really do it for the accolades. For me personally, it's actually kind of strange when people like, "Hey, thank you for your service," or "Here's a discount on your coffee," or you know, that kind of thing. But it also makes you feel a little bit better that you're actually out there helping people. And when that ebbs and flows and when that stops after, I mean, COVID was a big thing. It was very taxing. It was a very, very stressful time. And so for people to kind of recognize first responders and everybody that had an impact during COVID, and then all of a sudden it's just right back to normal. And we kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say get forgotten, but it kind of, life just returns to normal. Um, you kind of feel a little bit less than sometimes. Like, um, the job that we do didn't change, after COVID. In fact, we're still just as busy. We're still seeing some of the same stuff. We're still going through some of the same traumas. But everybody else's life seems to return to normal.
Yeah, Toby, everything you're saying is echoed in my experience being 20 years in emergency dispatch and communication. So I'm on the other side, sending people like yourself out to these events and these calls and ensuring your safety for when you get there. And like, I just even just have like such a heavy heart, even hearing you talk about it and the way you talk about it, because I have such a similar view from the other side of it, where we don't get to see patients and we only get to hear what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So, what question do I want to ask? We could talk for hours. I'm sure you and I. But
Absolutely.
I think the biggest thing that I want people to understand is, on a regular, for anybody that has a regular job, you may go through 3 to 5 critical incidents in your entire life, whether that's death of a family member, death of a friend, illness, cancer, anything like that. But what people don't understand is first responders go through 3 to 5 a month in their career. So that can be anywhere from 800 to 1200 events in your lifetime that you are dealing with critical events, and you're expected to leave your problems at the door.
Yep.
So how did you really reconcile with yourself of staying in the profession for as long as you have and managing those events that seemingly are endless? Like, what was your initial coping mechanisms before you found cycling? Like, what was it for you?
That's a great question, and I don't know. Um, I've actually been told quite frequently that there's a lot of folks that don't know how I've made this career what I have. Because I mean, as you know, like 20, 25 years, it's a long time in public safety these days. I think I forget the statistic, but I mean, we're seeing people get out of the career within like 5 years. And I joined at a time when I never talked about the things that I saw or did. I just kept burying it down. And I think for me, the way that I coped early on was to just surround myself with work. I felt like if I continued to just keep working and working and working, that nothing would ever catch up to me. Right? I'd never have a chance to process. So early on, I just surrounded myself with every possible thing fire or EMS related that I could, which led to kind of a downturn in the rest of my life. But that was my initial coping mechanism. Um, After some years and some of my heaviest trauma, I realized that I needed to really start seeking more help.
You're really mirroring my experience as well with that subconscious mind, where you end up maybe taking some more overtime shifts, working a little bit more, putting yourself into it more. I can't say for you, but I know for me, majority of my friendships and relationships were of first responders because of the shift work and the schedules. It was very rare that you got away from that mentality, the black humor, the things that keep you going that other people, I mean, black humor isn't meant for everybody to hear. It's meant for
Mhm.
you to manage and cope in those experiences. So, yeah, I'm going to pass it to Jason, but I just, yeah, it just echoes so much from my experience. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
wrote I wrote down the words running away, because that's what it sounded like to me with taking on additional overtime. It sounded like you were running away, or maybe in your case, cycling away, right? To get away from it all. What was the moment, the catalyst, the straw on the camel's back where you said, "I've got to stop running away and I've got to deal with this head on"?
It actually came a few years after probably one of my most traumatic calls in my career. Um, when when I noticed my own mental health hit absolutely rock bottom, um, and my physical health hit rock bottom a few years even after that. Um, but most of my calls, I was the stereotypical black cloud, as we call it in public safety. Most of my calls ended up on the news. There wasn't a shift. I mean, I remember some of my coworkers joking about it. Like, if I was the supervisor on shift, just bad things were going to happen, right? And I tended to end up on them. And I had one really, really traumatic call, which was the death of a coworker in a line of duty death that kind of sent me down my spiral, and it really came hitting rock bottom before I was like, okay, this what I'm doing is not working.
And what was the approach to getting help? Was it talking to a therapist? Was it talking to loved ones first and then to a therapist? Like, what was the process?
Yeah, it was not talking to loved ones. It was not talking to friends. In fact, to this day, there's only two people that really know my whole true story. I did share a lot of it at a little conference a couple weeks back, but I definitely kept a lot of my stuff from friends and family, and it was hitting rock bottom and realizing like I'm not okay, and it's no longer okay to not be okay. Like I need to get some help. That I just reached out and found a therapist to start working with.
Toby, it's, everybody has their own path and where they feel comfortable sharing. I mean, I was very similar. I didn't share much with my girlfriend at the time. I mean, I was sleeping 2 hours a night, sitting next to her, and she had no idea for months.
Yep,
And that's a really heavy place to be, to know that you're too afraid to share because you don't want to put that pain on other people.
exactly.
And that's, because those stories, you don't want anybody to have that, what they call vicarious trauma of
Mhm.
hearing those stories, because that can actually be sometimes even more traumatizing than the actual event itself for the other person. And you talked about the news and being the news. And anybody always asks me, like, "Oh, did you see the accident on the news?" I was like, "I was the news. I was the one that took that call today. Like, I don't need to
Yep.
watch the news because I'm creating the news at real time for everybody." Which is, you say Black Cloud. My nickname was Angel of Death. So we joke about it, but that's the
Yeah,
thing. Like, I see Jason very stoic, and you and I are just like having this smirk, like, yeah, like I get it.
I get it.
Um, so I want to touch back on kind of so you had the therapy journey, you started down that road, and how did you respond to therapy initially? Was it difficult for you to open up to somebody that wasn't necessarily aware of everything that was going on? And how, like, what was that story like? How long did it take you to get to the point of, I will say, like, surrender to the process of, like, I'm here for the reasons, and like I need to break in order to heal?
Yeah. That actually came relatively quick for me in therapy because I broke before therapy. Um, and the hardest part for me was at the time, there wasn't a lot of therapists that were specialized for public safety. And I really thought that I needed that. Um, And I struggled for a while to actually find somebody, and the state of mental health care here, and I'm guessing across the country, is very poor at the moment. It was hard to get in when I needed to get in. So it took me a while. Um, but it was relatively quick that I was able to open up. And one of the things that I realized was a lot of my trauma had been built up from childhood trauma and the way that I was raised and the way that I grew up. And a lot of that stuff added on to kind of my workplace trauma, and probably caused a lot of my behaviors and a lot of my things that went wrong, if you will, in my story, in my life. So it actually wasn't too terrible that I found a therapist that was not specialized in public safety, because a lot of what needed unpacking was more than just work.
Yeah, I got chills when you said that it wasn't necessarily what happened in the profession, but what you brought into it.
Yeah.
And I think that has always been a struggle for me, seeing the tests and the things that you go through to get into these professions, lie detector tests, personality tests, all these other things, and understanding that it's not necessarily what happens to you. Because again, like trauma is something, it's not something that happens to you, it's something that happens inside of you. And yeah, and those triggers are going to come up from things that you may not have dealt with from your past. So yeah, chills, man. I just appreciate you sharing. Jason, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I wrote down a quote that I read from Jamel Hill probably 2 or 3 years ago. She is a sports writer, journalist. She has a show on TBS now, I think. And she had written a while back that you can never outrun your childhood. And that's essentially what you said there, Toby. And it elicited a response in me, because once I realized what my childhood had brought to the table, it allowed me to open up. And so, did you find that when you realized that what you were bringing to the table allowed you to open up, did that also allow you to open up outside of talking to a therapist? In other words, when you were with your cycling group and riding, maybe not sharing the intimate details, but sharing just a little bit more about who you are in your life. And then all of a sudden, right, that rolling stone was gathering no moss, and you start to share a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah, that's 100% spot on. One of the things that I struggled with was kind of binge eating disorder, and uh, kind of coping with how I was feeling with food. Um, and a lot of the stress that I had on the bike became very cyclical. And, I didn't open up to my friends about it. I didn't fully know what was going on myself either at the time. Um, but I would go to get on the bike, and the bike would be a traumatic thing for me because of kind of what happened with it during one of my rides. And because of that trauma, I would fix it with food, and then it would be a cycle. And what I didn't realize was that kind of binge eating and that coping with food came from my very unhealthy childhood with food and my relationship that happened early on with that. And so once I started to unpack some of that and I started to understand myself, it was a lot easier to start opening up to friends and family and people around, and realizing that I was actually a lot more accepted for how I was than I was thinking. Like, I felt a lot of shame around my actions. And once I was able to process that and start coming out with some of it, then the shame feeling kind of went away. Like, that's when I really started to truly believe, like what I like to say is, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, this conversation has got me writing down more things than I thought it would. Like, I'm just taking notes here because we talked about binge eating, and that was something I suffered with, and have to work through on a continuous basis today. At one point, you weighed 330 pounds. You, in November of 24, you mentioned you had lost nearly 100 pounds at that point. And the question I wanted to ask in regards to that is, how do you work with your relationship with food today, based on knowing what you know and mentioned about your relationship with food as a child?
It took a lot of work through therapy. I actually worked EMDR through some of my food addictions and my binge eating. And then it took working with a nutritionist for a while as well to get back into understanding the healthy habits with food and seeing food as a fuel versus a coping mechanism. So my relationship with food today is much better than it ever has been. But I still have moments where I struggle and I look for something or I turn for something to soothe that. Like I don't think it's fully gone, but I'm at least aware of it now. And everybody in my life is kind of aware of it. I've been very open with that particular struggle. And so I have a lot of support when it comes to like having better coping mechanisms.
Toby, I just want to just cycle back really quickly to the part where we were talking about the childhood trauma and what that got brought into the profession. Do you think that any of those things that occurred earlier in life are what pushed you towards moving into a profession to help others? That really, it's, I mean, because we both know it's easier to help others and easier to not help ourselves. So
Yeah.
just curious what it was for you.
Yeah, I actually, most people when they're like, why'd you get in this business? And they're like, I wanted to drive fast and have lights and sirens. And for me, it actually stemmed from a car accident that I was in when I was a teenager. And my father passed away in that car accident. I was hospitalized, I was airlifted, a bunch of stuff, spent some time in the ICU, and really had lasting impacts physically and mentally for me. And it was pretty much from that day on that I knew I wanted to give back. And losing my father at an early age and kind of being forced to be the provider for my younger sisters and those around me, like I was forced to grow up really fast and really took care of people before I ever took care of myself. And that carried on in life. And throughout my career, like it was a lot of the baggage that I carried too, was I didn't want other people to have to deal with what I was carrying. So I just kept it.
It's a heavy backpack.
Yeah,
Heavy
it sure
backpack.
was.
Yeah, I want to touch on. So there's a book that I found. It's called Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. Early on in my own mental health journey, and he has this scale called the emotional scale of consciousness, and it basically is like all the levels of emotion from like 20 all the way up to 500 is this scale. And at the very bottom are the things like shame, guilt, fear, grief, the suffering, the getting by, those types of things. And at the top is like enlightenment, peace, joy, love, at the top of the scale. And it's really like as you surrender and let go, you kind of move slowly up this scale towards, pride, courage, willingness, neutrality, and moving towards that kind of, that ever so elusive enlightenment, that, everybody is kind of wondering, like, how do you get there? Um, I see that you're in a different spot now on your journey, because those of us who have gone through stuff, at the point that we are able to talk about it without breaking down, that just tells me that you're in a different place now. So based on that kind of scale where shame and guilt are at the bottom, and you have that like neutral willingness in the middle and enlightenment at the top, like where would you say you're on your scale now? And how has it evolved over the last, I'll just say, even like few months for you?
I'm a lot closer to the top of that scale with the happiness, the joy. That I wouldn't say I'm quite to enlightenment yet, but I'm getting close. And it's really taken. I mean, this last year probably is when I've really started to see it. I mean, with my health journey, as well as being okay with who I am. Like, I think the thing I want to stress was a couple years ago, I did not like myself. Not at all. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like what I had become. I was not at all proud of who I was as a person. And now I'm proud of myself. I'm happy. I'm finding joy in things that used to be very traumatic and not bring joy. And yeah, I can definitely see that scale, and I can see my progression through it for sure.
One of the things I've been known to say is talk to everybody because you don't know how you will connect to people. Um, pardon me, but you said you lost your father at a young age, and so did I. I was 23 years old when I lost my dad. And the note I wrote here was, carrying others' burdens. And I want to know from you, have you been able to find a way to grieve the loss of your father? Because I know for me, it didn't actually, and it's still happening. I didn't really address my own grief about the loss of my father until maybe a handful of years ago, because it was, being there for my sister, being there for my mother, being there for everybody else. And I didn't really start to process the loss of my father probably until a number of years, a handful of years ago, to be honest. And I find myself some days watching TV and crying because my father loved 60 Minutes, and I watch it to this day because he watched it. So my question to you is: have you been able to start the grieving process of the loss of your dad, and has that helped you in dealing with the other traumas that have come about from other parts of life?
Man, that's a tough one. I was not expecting. The short answer, no. Um, so we'd have to back up a little bit. My parents were divorced when I was 5. I had moved to Minnesota from Utah and lived with my mom after they divorced, and so I didn't have a really close relationship with my dad from the time I was 5 until I was 12. When I was 12, I was out on a visit with my dad, and I called up my mom and I was like, Mom, I want to live with dad, right? I'm old enough now to make that decision. I want to get to know him. And it was a year later that we were in our car accident, and he had died. So I didn't have a very close relationship to begin with, although it was building. Um, and I didn't get the closure. I was actually just talking with a friend about this. I didn't get the closure because I didn't even get to go to the memorial service. I was still in the ICU, and that was held during a time that I couldn't attend, right? My father was cremated, and his ashes are spread somewhere in Hawaii. I wasn't there for any of that, right? I don't even really know where they're at exactly, other than somewhere in Hawaii. So I was forced to kind of figure out how to grieve on my own. My mom, when we got back here to Minnesota, because I had moved back out to Utah during that time, and when I moved back after the accident, I mean, my mom had gotten me into some therapy and stuff, but honestly, I never really got to process that. And I did a little bit with my therapist later in life. We did some EMDR with it to get over some of those feelings and the narrative that I had built in my head. But I'm with you, Jason. I still have moments that I find myself just breaking down, right? I can't, my dad loved the show MASH, right? I can't watch MASH without just losing it, right? It's one of my things that I can't watch. So
we live right where MASH has been filmed. So if you want to go on a little journey, I'm happy to go with you to where MASH is filmed, and we can have ourselves a good sit down and cry and process those feelings. If you ever make your way out here to California, man, I'm there for you.
yeah, I might have to take you up on that.
Oh man, like just hearing you guys speak about your fathers. There's a song that I don't know if you've heard it. So this guy's getting very popular now, called Stephen Wilson Jr. Have either of you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this song is going to hit you hard. Don't listen to it now. But the song is called "Grief Is Only Love," And there's a line in the song that says, "Grief is only love that's got no place to go." And like that's what I wrote down right away as soon as you guys were talking, and I'm like, that's what it is. It's like you have this love for these people, and you have nowhere to put it now because they're not here. So yeah, that's a big one. But in saying that, I would really want to go back to this scale and how you've climbed it. Climb that ladder, climb the scale, whatever you want to call it. And now you're moving around similar to where I am, at this place of joy and peace and understanding. And cycling is a big part of that, from what I've heard and what I understand. So, what is cycling for you, and what does it do for you? And what do you want people to know about it that, they may not think about when they think about cycling?
For me now, it's my happy place and my place that I can go and be with my thoughts and kind of disconnect and push my body and my mind to do tough things. And that's what I thought it was when I was using it for my own therapy before I had processed my trauma. But what I found was like a really bad thing, because the bike for me became my problem. And we talked a little bit about this, Jason, when we talked about my story. Because I didn't process that trauma, and I thought that I was using that bike as therapy, it became the tool for me to also try to find a way out. And after that, the bike got hung up, the bike got put away, the bike became a very scary thing. And it wasn't until I progressed through those levels, and started to find joy again and find happiness, and saw that the bike for me was really, it truly is my happy place. It truly is the place that I can just go and be free and push my body and mind. So that's where I'm at today. But it was not always the therapy that I thought it was.
Thanks to conversations that I've been able to have with you and Evan and a bunch of other folks throughout this journey of building Run, Try, Bike, the word that keeps popping into my head is perspective, and it allows me to remove myself from the moment that I'm in. Doesn't always work. Yesterday I had a massive case of imposter syndrome and I could not find perspective. So it's not always happening. But as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if Toby has moments of perspective when he is joyful on the bike today, and how at some point it was not enjoyment and it was a problem. And do you then find yourself having even a moment because of the perspective that you can gain from the idea of, at one point this wasn't fun and now it is?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge part of it, right? Is, for me, I've overcome that obstacle, and being able to do something that I wasn't able to do before, being able to ride farther without the negative, the intrusive thoughts, the like truly feeling free on it. Definitely a different perspective for sure. And now when I get on it, knowing the negative that I had with that bike, really makes me feel more accomplished, I think, and feel a lot better about myself for being where I'm at today than I was. I didn't let the bike win, the negative part of the bike, right? Like, I beat that, and now I can go out and I can enjoy the bike again.
When you're done with a ride, do you take stock and inventory of what happened in that particular ride in that particular moment? And I'll give you an example. When we run on the weekends, we go and have coffee and some nachos, and we talk about what transpired during the run. And I feel that has allowed me to take stock and inventory of the enjoyable parts. of the run and bring those memories, and those thoughts to the top of the pile, as opposed to getting lost in the weeds of the hard. And I'm wondering if that's a part of building the perspective of enjoyment on the bike for you as well.
It is. I do the same thing. And I've actually found a lot more enjoyment in the hard moments. Maybe the best part of my ride was that I effortlessly climbed a hill that was a struggle before, right? Or I pushed more miles, or things like that. But I also enjoy the little moments, things that I wasn't noticing before because I was so stuck in my negative thoughts that I never took a time to look around and, notice the cows in the field next to me, or, the smells, the sounds, just turning off the headphones for a little bit and listening. Um, I enjoy those a lot more. And I look back and remember a lot of that more than I ever did.
I know with Run Try Bike and myself and and Jason, we connected on this sense of community and bringing people together and sharing people's stories that we may never hear otherwise. So for me, like, community is a big thing, and I'm sure, just like the ultra running world, the running world, the endurance world, the cycling community probably has a special place for you as well, and the people that you've connected with. Because coming from a first responder community that, I will say, has this very warped sense of stoicism to it, that you always have to be hard. You can't be soft. You can't share these things. You have to keep it like stuck in. And I don't think, if you were to look at ancient stoicism, like, that's what they really meant about it.
Yeah.
But for some reason we've warped it to that, like, that we have to be these, I think of like the movie 300, like gladiators, like that we have to be that all the time and always on. And being always on is exhausting. So what is it about the cycling community for you that, obviously, you had the first responder community, and I'm sure you probably still have friendships from that. I do as well.
Yep.
But what is it about the cycling community? Because really, first responders are so stoic, and yes, we joke and laugh, but it's usually humor that nobody else should be hearing. What is it for the cycling community for you that brings you into that, and what do you love about it?
I found a huge support network with the cycling community because everybody is just very welcoming. It doesn't matter your level of ability or how long you've been doing it or what you look like. It's becoming a lot more inclusive, and I love that sense of community and welcoming. Like, come as you are, just show up on your bike and have fun, right? Um, it's also been a nice way to disconnect. A lot of my cycling friends are still in public safety, so we kind of connect around that a little bit. But generally, we're not talking about work when we're on the bike. We're laughing. We're uh, just having a good time and kind of disconnecting from that work. But
When we go through these traumas, we learn a lot about ourselves. We start to figure out a little bit more about society, and so I want to follow up that answer with communities outside of cycling. Have you been able to say to yourself, you know what, it's a little scary to go and find whatever it might be, a book club, or a group of friends that really likes music and go to concerts or whatever it might be, but you did it anyway because you've gone through a lot of hard stuff, and this can't possibly be harder in your mind. So I'm wondering, like, outside of cycling, are there other communities that you have found yourself gravitating towards and participating in to also help, stretch your mind beyond the trauma that you've experienced?
I think the next biggest community I've found has been my community at the gym, which for me has been something new. I was never a person that went to the gym ever. I was never successful. Um, and part of my health journey, my improvement journey with that, was walking into a gym one day and just finding a home. Uh, and many of the people there, like, I've connected with because I've shared some of my struggles. I've been open about my weight loss and the ups and downs with that. And Jason, you mentioned imposter syndrome. Like I felt that a lot lately. Like I don't deserve to be where I'm at. I don't like, how can I be a coach at this gym when I struggle myself, right? And I still don't feel like I'm where I should be in my own journey. So that's been my biggest community that I think I've connected with and gravitated towards. Um, I haven't really stepped out yet into anything else, to be honest. I think I'm still just a little bit introverted when it comes to that.
Yeah, they say that you only have to know 5% more than the other person to like have them look up to you as a coach or anything like that. So it's, it's such a minimal amount. And I think stepping up into those roles for ourselves is also helping us grow in ways that we never would have been able to had we not done that, which is such a cool place to come at it from. I really want to touch on the aspect of first responder life and what a true baseline is. I mean, we as first responders have gone through fight or flight all the time, always switched on. You always have to be on. And as I said, on is exhausting. So moving, into the different roles and the other things that you've done and finding that like true baseline where you can, calm your nervous system down and bring yourself to a level where you're like, oh, is this how normal people feel all the time? What is that for you? I mean, and I can see you and I are very similar in the sense of it's hard to emote still to this day for me because I taught myself how not to feel in order to stay in the profession helping other people. So for you, like, what is it for you now? Like, what does it feel like being able to know that you don't always have to be on?
I'm still learning how to not be on all the time. That's a hard switch for me to flip off. But I've kind of swung the opposite way of probably sharing too much, probably talking too much, probably feeling like, okay, now I can just let it all out. And that to me sometimes feels very strange because, as you know, like keeping everything in and not sharing and not talking, it's been my norm. It's been just kind of the thing that I've done. It has been nice to be able to decompress though, and to be able to switch off a little bit. That fight or flight is a real thing. And like you said, we're always on, always on. And it was exhausting.
One of the reasons why I love having these conversations is being able to tie different components together. And I had no idea that we were going here, but Evan mentioned you just have to know 5% more than somebody else for them to look up to you. And simultaneously, we were talking about imposter syndrome. And then right after that, the dismissiveness of being brave is something that I wrote down, where if somebody was to say to you, it's brave to come out and talk about this stuff, you're elevating yourself to the 5% above the people who aren't, which puts you into that position of leadership. People can come and look to you. But do you think, because I know I do it, like anytime I crack a joke when somebody compliments me, my joke following up is, that's the trauma talking, right? Like I'm going to push that to the side and block it out. Don't compliment me, kind of thing. Do you find yourself doing that as well? And do you think that that's what's going to be something that helps you when you address it to overcome the imposter syndrome, to be like, yeah, I'm a coach. I belong here. I can help other people.
I don't know. Because that imposter syndrome has been a really big struggle for me. And I kind of use the thing like, it's just me, right? I'm just me. That's kind of my thing that I follow stuff up with, right? I've never been one that has felt that I am brave for sharing my story or for being vulnerable. Because for me, it's just always been like, if I can help one person by sharing my story, then it's been worth it, right? And it's just me. It's just what I do. I actually had a friend reach out who's been going through some stuff and had mentioned reading the article that we had was in Run Try Bike, and how I had, my thing is it's okay to not be okay, and that stuck with them. And they reached out just the other day about it and said like they're kind of in the shit, and reading that was what they needed to be like, okay, I need to get the help, right? And so I think seeing that more is what helps the imposter syndrome. Like, okay, my vulnerability is helping others, but it's hard to get compliments on it. It truly is. I've never been a person that's accepted compliments very easily.
It is amazing to me because I feel the same way. People will ask me for advice. They'll talk to me. I mean, I'm an adjunct teacher at the college level, working with 18 to 28-year-olds. And then I leave those classrooms some days and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm up here. Like, what do I know? And it's a struggle to get through that process. I do have to say that running this company and again, talking to people like yourself and Evan and the others that we've had on our various shows really helps, because I have come to realize that we are absolutely all the same when it's said and done. We're all dealing with something in some form or fashion. Before I turn it over to Evan, we do have a question from the audience on Instagram, and it's actually for both of you. This is coming from Craig Lewis, who is the host of our show, Running Tales. And he's asking, with the everything on way of life for first responders and the trauma that you witness in your jobs, irrespective of any previous problems, how can society make our first responders be kept well and healthy? Because the roles that you fulfill are extremely vital. Evan, I'll turn that to you first, and then we'll ask Toby.
I would say respect is really the only one that they can really do. I've talked about it in a few of my own interviews and podcasts that ultimately it's the organizations and the people in leadership who need to step up and make people the priority. The human cost of not doing that is far greater than saving a certain amount of money in your budget each year. It's really leadership stepping up. And if those leaders can't step up, they need to step down. That's what it is for me. But the respect from the community, I think, is the only thing they can really do. Ultimately, I think speaking up and talking about this and sharing these stories that it's people aren't okay, and the profession is still, I would say, declining, and far less people are going into it because they don't see themselves staying in it for much longer. But yeah, leadership needs to step up and or step down.
How about you, Toby?
I would echo that 100%. I think people tend to forget that we're people taking care of people, right? And it's not a job that can be outsourced. It's not a job that can be replaced by machines or robots. It's that respect, I think, for me as well, and understanding that it's a profession that is definitely declining, and it's not one that people are staying in to make it a career like they used to. It's more of a stepping stone, I think, for many people. And so just understanding that we're people taking care of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to quickly touch on the imposter syndrome piece because I feel like I have something I want to add to it. And then I'm going to go into our follow-up or our final segment. So really, imposter syndrome, and I heard it said this way, that if you're not feeling it at least once every 6 months, then you're doing something wrong. It's actually supposed to be something you are feeling and not rejecting, because it means you're growing. And really, you talk about the compliments, and you and Jason both said it, like you find it hard to take compliments. And I was the exact same way. I would be the kid that would be, if a girl came up and talked to me or anything, I would be staring at the ground. I couldn't look them in the eyes. And I don't know if anybody else can resonate with that, but I took it upon myself to, if somebody gave me a compliment, rather than self-deprecating humor and minimizing myself by doing that, I made a point of saying thank you. That's it. That's all I'm allowed to say now. Somebody gives me a compliment, all I can say is thank you. So I just want to challenge you both. The next time somebody gives you a compliment, just say thank you and see how that changes your thoughts about yourself. And over time, it will shift.
It's an interesting thing because Toby described himself as an introvert, and I would describe myself as an extrovert, right? Like, I want to walk in the room, I want to talk to people, but I want to talk to them. I want to ask them questions. I am interested in what they have to say. And it's probably a defense mechanism now that we're talking about this, right? If I ask you a question first, you can't ask me one, and I can just focus on you. And
Yeah.
this is exactly why this show is so important. Like, I've just come to an understanding of why the extrovertedness in me is there. And that's pretty awesome to see, like, or hear and understand. So thanks for that insight, Evan. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything to add to that, Toby, before we go into
Ja-
the final segment?
Jason, do you feel that you've always been that way in your personal life, or do you feel like that's part of your role as well with this run, try, bike, and kind of what you've developed? Because for me, when I put on the uniform, or when I walk into the gym as a coach, or when I'm in a role like that, I am 100% extroverted. I am that outgoing. It's almost like I put on a Superman costume, right? But the minute that those things come off, I feel a lot more introverted and um, hard to take those compliments and hard to find some of those same interactions.
I think I've been that way my entire life. And it- leader has been the thing that has always been something that has been described of me, right? I walked onto SUNY Oswego, immediately joined a fraternity, and immediately was within the Brotherhood Development Council. I became the president of that organ of my fraternity at one point. I was the president of the Fort Worth Tri Club. Like, leader is the thing that has always been a part of my life, and um, I think back to even when I was playing Little League Baseball. I remember our third baseman would always ole, and for those of you who don't know ole, think about the with the bulls where they have the cape and they ole and they move their hand out of the way so the bull can run past. Well, that's what he was doing at third base. He would ole every ground ball. And I just walked over to him and I said, "Get out of the way. Let me show you how it's done." Like, the coach didn't tell me to do that. I just did it. And I stood there and the coach would just hit ground balls at me and I would knock him down with my chest and everything else, as a leader by example in that sense. So I think it's just always been that way. But I think the parts that came about from and hiding them were a result of losing my father at such a young age, in addition to having been moved out of what I would call a natural habitat in the Bronx, where everybody looked different, everybody did different things, everybody acted differently, and moved to the suburbs. And all of a sudden, everybody looked the same, and every house looked the same, and every yard looked the same, and every car looked the same. And I was like freaking out in a sense. And so I think, like, that piece there, the moving into the suburbs while my parents had great intentions, I think that's the thing that impacted me into the point of, okay, don't be yourself in a sense and just put up this facade. And I think that was kind of what happened throughout life. That's a great question. By the way, my interview was last month, not today.
I like it. Guest turning the tables. It's
Yeah.
perfect. But that's how we grow. We learn from each other, right?
Yep.
All right. I love this segment. I talked to Jason and Ohm about this a while back, and we brought it in after Jason's episode is when we first threw it at him, Ohm and I. So the segment's called Stop, Start, Continue. And the segment of the podcast is based on the Japanese tradition of misogi. And at its core, misogi is about transformation. It's about shedding old habits, beliefs, and ideas, embracing and letting in a new and more powerful version of yourself, while letting go and surrendering in order to grow. We're going to be inviting the Enduring Minds community to be a part of this concept in a bigger way. So watch out for that. We're working on that in the background. So the first question for you, Toby, is your stop question. If you had to choose one mental or emotional habit you want to leave behind this year, what would it be and why?
For me, it would be to leave behind, like not believing in myself to my full extent. That's still a struggle with me. And I've seen that I'm able to overcome a lot, and I just need to believe it. And I need to stop that narrative in my head. Like, I deserve to be here. I'm good enough. I can do this.
Oh, yeah, good. Oh, man, some people are stumped. You're not stumped by that one. Okay, start question. If you were to commit to a radical mental shift this next year that would force you to grow in new ways, what would it be and why?
Man, that's going to be the stumper. Um,
I love people thinking like Jason and I are just sitting in the background, just so far when we've asked this, even Jason, like everybody's taken a pause on every question. And it's like, that's why we're doing this, because it's helping people commit to something in their mind and move forward with it. And that's really what it is.
I think for me, the thing that I would like to start is continuing to make like some of my mental habits stick. Um, you guys both talk a lot about reading books and things of that nature, and for me, I think I have a hard time. I'll start a book, I can't finish it. I'll lose interest. And for me, it's just starting something, finishing it, and learning from it.
Awesome. Last question. Continue. If you had to symbolically cleanse or renew one aspect of your mental health in the next year, what would it be and why?
Um,
Something you want
I
to
think
continue doing. Yeah.
I think the continue is just to be aware of my feelings and my thoughts and my emotions, and continue to share them and be open about them.
And why is that important
Why?
to you?
Because I lived way too long keeping it in, and it almost destroyed me. Um, and so, again, if my sharing, if my being open, if my being vulnerable can help myself and just one other person, then why not continue?
I will add to that it's never too late to start either. A couple of days ago, I went to the bookstore, bought a new journal, an empowerment journal, where most people would have started this, the turn of the new year, new year, new me kind of stuff. We're nearly done with February, and I bought a new journal, and I bought a planner for the rest of this year to help me organize. So it's never too late to start. Toby, want to thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to share pieces of your story with us today. For those of you who are just jumping on, this will be live on our YouTube channel, but you can go read Toby's story on our website, runtrimag.com. Do you have any final thoughts, words, or wisdom, or a story that you want to leave us with? And where can people connect with you and everything that you're doing out in the world?
I just want to say thanks to both Evan, you, Jason, for having me on. I think I want to leave people with, like, it's truly okay to not be okay, as long as you can recognize that, talk about that, and seek the help that you need, no matter what it is. I think understanding, like, you're not broken, right? We all go through struggles for whatever reason. It's all right to not be all right. As far as connecting with me, Instagram's the best place. I don't post a ton on social media, but enough of my cycling and some of my photography is up there. So yeah, that's the best place.
Awesome. Appreciate you being on the show. We will catch you here real soon and chat again, Toby. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you both.
I want to thank the audience for joining us today on Enduring Minds. This was our 5th episode. We are doing 2 a month with guests at this point. You can find us on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, where we are one of 9 incredible shows. Do me a favor, subscribe, rate, review, like, share, as it will allow us to continue to grow and bring in incredible guests like Toby Oehler and the captivating stories that he has, as well as other people in our Enduring Minds community. Our next episode will feature Shannon Booker, and that will be on March 13th. So until next time, let's continue going the distance and breaking the silence.